In the Netherlands, the International Court of Justice celebrates the last day of hearings of the legal consequences of the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. In Ecuador, more than 10,000 people have been detained as a result of the operations carried out in the framework of the internal armed conflict since January 9th. The government of the President of Argentina, Javier Milei, has reduced the subsidies that ruled for families' allowances for formal workers. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In the Netherlands, the International Court of Justice holds the last day of hearings on the legal consequences of the prolonged Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories at the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem. The judges of the organism continue to hear this Monday the arguments presented by the representatives of different countries. The public hearing began a week ago at The Hague, following the request of the United Nations General Assembly for an advisory opinion on the legal consequences of Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory. Throughout the days, the countries denounced the apartheid policies, the persecution of the Palestinian population, and the illegal settlements policies of Israel, along with other concerns. In this context, Turkey's Deputy Foreign Minister Ahmet Yildiz, in his declaration, told judges that his country could not be blind-eyed in face of this situation.
We have always been on the side of the oppressed, regardless of their identity. That is why Turkey cannot be indifferent to Israel's attempts to change the character and status of the occupied Palestinian territories. And we cannot be indifferent to the continuous attacks of Israel against Palestinian people.
Likewise, the Turkish representative emphasized the deficiency of the international community to confront this conflict, pointing out that the United Nations Security Council has failed in its duty to maintain international peace and security.
The lack of political interest in the international community to address the root of the problem has caused a great injustice to the Palestinian people and to the international community as a whole. The United Nations Security Council has the primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security, and in this case has failed to fulfill those duties. Most United Nations countries have called for an unconditional and immediate ceasefire, as well as access to humanitarian aid. For now, unfortunately, the Security Council has failed to make these demands a reality.
In Palestine, the Prime Minister Mohammad Shtayyeh officially presented his resignation to President Mahmoud Abbas due to the escalation of violence in the occupied West Bank and the genocide in Gaza. The now former minister explained that the decision comes in the context of political security and economic developments related to the aggression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the unprecedented situation in the occupied West Bank. Shtayyeh stated that they are currently facing genocide, famine, attempts of forced displacement and the intensification of colonialism. In this context, he stated that the next stage must take into account the emerging reality in the Gaza Strip, thus requiring new governmental and political arrangements guided by the urgent need for an inter-Palestinian consensus.
I wish to inform the Honorable Council and our great people that I made available to Mr. President the resignation of the government last Tuesday, February 20, 2024, and I am submitting it in writing today. This decision comes in light of the political, security, and economic developments related to the aggression against our people in Gaza and the unprecedented escalation in the West Bank and the city of Jerusalem. The next stage and its challenges require new governmental and political arrangements that take into account the emerging reality in the Gaza Strip, the national unity talks, and the urgent need for an inter-Palestinian consensus based on a national basis, broadening participation unity, and the extension of the authority of the Palestinian Authority of the entire territory.
In Palestine, Israel reportedly perpetrated 10 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The attacks in different parts of Gaza left 90 people killed and at least 164 wounded, according to health authorities. Meanwhile, on the 143rd day of the ongoing occupation aggression against the Palestinian enclave, at least 15 citizens were martyred and dozens wounded, among them children and women, in an Israeli attack targeting a house in the Al-Saytun neighborhood. Since last October 7th, Israel has killed 29,782 civilians and wounded more than 70,000, while thousands of bodies lie in the rubble of the devastated region. On Sunday, an active duty airman of the United States Air Force was seriously injured after setting himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., declaring that he will no longer be complicit in genocide. In a video of the incident, the man identifies himself as Aaron Bushnell and says that he is about to engage in an extreme act of protest, claiming that what he is about to do is minimal compared to the suffering of Palestinians. He then places the recording device on the ground before pouring an unknown liquid over himself and lighting it while shouting "Free Palestine" repeatedly. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. In Ecuador, more than 10,000 people have been detained as a result of the operations carried out in the framework of the international armed conflict since January 9th. According to data from security forces, 10,134 people have been apprehended in thousands of operations carried out nationwide. In addition, they detailed that have been seized thousands of weapons and explosives, as well as over 60 tons of drugs. By orders of the government of Daniel Noboa, the country continues in the midst of a state of exception and internal armed conflict under the argument of neutralizing 22 criminal groups catalogued as terrorists. However, citizens and civil organizations have denounced alleged violations of rights by the police and military. In Argentina, the government of Javier Milei has reduced the subsidies that ruled for families' allowances for formal workers. According to a decree published this Monday in the official Gazette, the measure is urgent and affects benefits such as the family salary per child, prenatal allowance, adoption allowances, and annual school aid, among others. According to local media, the cut in the allowances reaches about 50% of the total amount that was given to Argentine families in aid. This new measure by Milei does not do more than cutting income in general to the mothers who take care of their children and count on that income, leaving thousands of families out of the system. For analysts, the measure is contrary to what is expected in a moment of crisis, such as the one we are experiencing in Argentina. In Guatemala, this Sunday, dozens of people, mostly indigenous, with flowers, small wooden crosses and photographs gathered in the historic center of the capital city in commemoration of the National Day for the Dignity of the Victims of the Armed Conflict and also to demand the attention of the government. During the rally, they called that President Bernardo Arévalo should resume the preparation policies established in the peace accords in order to continue the search for thousands of disappeared. According to the victims' families' organizations, the government of former President Alejandro Yamatei dismantled the institutions in charge of compensating the victims of the armed conflict. This internal armed conflict took place between 1960 and 1996, leaving a balance of more than 250,000 victims, including the murdered and disappeared.
We have missing relatives, we have grandparents, we have uncles and aunts,
We don't know if they are still alive or no longer alive, if they are somewhere in the country or out of the country. We don't know.
In Bolivia, the current rainy season, which began last November, caused the death of 39 people nationwide and affected more than 12,000 families. In a statement, the Vice Minister of Civil Defense, Juan Carlos Calvin Montes, said that practically the whole country has been affected by floods and that the Department of La Paz is the most affected, where there have been street collapses, landslides, material dragging, and river floods that have affected local roads and houses built near the tributaries. In this sense, the Bolivian President Luis Arce informed that he had ordered the deployment of the military to help evacuate families and their belongings. In Cuba, the International Book Fair of Havana came at an end this Sunday. Thousands of citizens attended the hut and the 17 subsidies during the 10 days of the literary event. This Sunday, the presentation of the group La Colmenita opened with music and children's voices on the first farewell road during its closing. For its part, Brazil was the guest of honor at the event and showed the best of its literature and contemporary authors. The Cuban Book Institute, organizer of the Great Literary Festival, made available to the public more than 3 million books, including paper and digital formats, and also presented 1,000 new publications. Countries such as Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, Mexico, among others, were presented in this edition.
There is an incredible variety of books, especially here in this area, where they bring books of Brazilian literature. I found it very interesting because it's a way to share, and I have met many Brazilian writers that I did not know, and the way of writing is amazing. But in general, the variety of themes at the fair is very wide. Let's see, really, if I start to name books, because the truth is that I have found a lot, but look at this one, The Three Deaths of Kay. I have been looking at it for a while, and the truth is that I think the book is very promising, and I have found other novels. It is very spectacular. As always, every year, since the horizons are almost always broadened with each book, which is literature that is brought here, and also with the guest country, which is the country of Brazil, which also wants to innovate with new knowledge from their area, and not only Brazil, but also from other countries. The incorporation of some contributions from Europe, also from Asia, and also from the French Association, and it seems to me a very innovative event, also to acquire knowledge and to help us to our mental enrichment.
We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with telesur. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The United States Central Intelligence Agency have created and managed a network of secret bases in Ukraine for the past 8 years. Sergei Dovretzky, a senior Ukrainian intelligence commander, told the New York Times that at least 12 secret sites for espionage purposes have been built along the Russian border since 2016 and were financed and equipped by the agency. The CIA is believed to have provided the Ukrainians with intelligence to conduct targeted missile strikes, track Russian troop movements, and help maintain espionage networks, as well as helping Kyiv train a new generation of Ukrainian spies operating in Russia and Europe. This Sunday, thousands of people rallied in major Austrian cities under the protest slogan, "Defend democracy," to stand up against the extreme right wing. The rallies were called by the Friday for Future environmental group, along with 2 other activist groups, Black Voices and the Platform for a Human Asylum Policy. The organizers called for a reaction at the ballot box against the far right, avoiding at all costs government pacts with openly extremist formations.
We are here in Vienna in front of the parliament, and we will soon start our chanting. We take a clear stand against right-wing extremism, which in fact seriously threatens our democracy in Austria. People are standing up against it today.
In Belgium, some 150 tractors today partially blocked the capital's central road, Rue de la Loi, at the European quarter, where a meeting of European Union agriculture ministers is scheduled to take place. Under the slogan, Europe, wake up, our farms are your lunch, protect the farmers, the mobilized sector carry out road blockades around the Euro Room of the European Union Council residence, where the meeting of European agriculture ministers is being held. These mobilizations were repressed by police officers who used water cannons to disperse the crowd. The farmers are protesting against the fall in their incomes, environmental regulations, administrative overload of free trade agreements, such as the one still to be concluded between the European Union and Mercosur. Also in Spain, farmers from all over the country gathered with their tractors in front of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food in Madrid. Under the slogan, the countryside demands support, respect and recognition, the sector is demanding significant changes in policies and regulations that affect its daily activity. One of the main concerns of the farmers is the need for reforms in the agri-food chain law, which regulates commercial relations between producers, industry and distribution.
We are demonstrating because we want both the Ministry and the European Union, which is the destination of these demonstrations at the European headquarters, to understand what is the real situation of the primary sector that works at zero cost to maintain the rest of society. We ask first fair prices for our products, having fair prices, and that the intermediaries of the large distribution in this country and in the rest of Europe take the benefit. We must take the farmers, ranchers and livestock, and not to be passed on to customers. That is happening now. Basically that, and we ask for the support of all citizens.
I am supporting our agriculture, our fisheries, and above all, against the 2030 agenda to ruin of all. First, talk to us, not when you have a demonstration of farmers complaining. Go to Morocco to help them. That's the first thing. I think you have to sit down and talk, and not humiliate us in this way, as he did by going to Morocco.
In Senegal, presidential candidates called on the population to hold a mock election on February 25th, the date on which voters were to go to the polls before President Macky Sall postponed the elections. Opposition supporters in Senegal took part in symbolic voting Sunday to demonstrate their objection to the postponement of the presidential elections, which was initially scheduled for February 25th. The symbolic vote in the capital Dakar was organized by a loose grouping of 16 presidential candidates calling themselves the FC25, ostensibly to show their opposition to the postponement of the presidential elections and to demand a new election date without delay.
We wanted to make him understand that, despite the security measures taken, despite his invitation to a dialogue that does not comply with the decision of the Constitutional Council, we wanted to give him a national and international opinion that February 25 is still election day for us.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.